Okay, everyone, welcome to the Dev AMA for GoobnBalloonsDX. I am joined by the dev team here to answer some of your questions, and yeah, they'll be answering questions, giving you some awesome insight onto the game, and what it's like to create a game. I'd like to just go around and like you guys to introduce yourself. So starting from the top of my list, Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben. I worked on Goob Balloons as an artist and animator, and did a bunch of odd jobs here and there as well.
Awesome. Veronica.
Hello, I'm Veronica. I'm one of the lead artists and animators on the project. And like Ben said, we kind of just do a little bit of everything.
Awesome. Rick's reverse. You can have to introduce your full name as well.
My name is Chris Camp, and I am one of the two directors. I direct more of the creative side of the game. I've done some animations, some business stuff, a little bit of everything.
Awesome. And we have Thomas.
Hi, I'm one of the composers for Goobin Balloons here representing Spedanza Audio, which is our company, and we worked with Iconic Arts to do the score. And some of the voiceover too, I think. Yeah.
So for me on Discord, strangely, I just have three symbols, like three boxes.
Yeah, that's all that needs to be there. Yeah, my name is Finton, and I was the lead programmer.
Awesome. Thanks for coming today, guys. It's awesome to have you here. And we have someone else joining us. This is
Hey, it's Jill.
Hello.
Jill.
Howdy.
Hi.
all right.
Welcome.
So first question that I have on my list. Can you tell us about the games that inspire Goob Balloons DX? What elements did you adopt, implement, or adapt into the game? Does anyone like to take this question?
I think I would, myself or Finton. I guess we could both talk about that.
Absolutely.
I think I'll let you take the stage here.
Cool. So Goobin Balloons was heavily inspired by Bird and Bean, which is this very small mini game from the WarioWare franchise. You play as a little bird, and these little beans fall from the sky, and you need to eat them before they hit the ground. And each time they hit the ground, that piece of ground would actually fall apart. And you would keep going until a bean hit the main character. His name was oh god, what's the main character's Pyoro? And yeah, it kind of started from that concept, but instead of having the ground fall out from you, we kept the idea of something hitting the main character, and we went for balloons. And we wanted to kind of capture that arcadey style, but also take that concept as far as we could with like a story mode and bosses.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that?
In particular, the reason why Bird and Bean was the inspiration was because when we originally sought out to make I don't want to say the prototype. I guess the original Game Jam game that inspired this game, right? The theme of the jam was growth, and what we wanted was like, oh hey, it's a game where you shoot balloons until they pop. They grow until they pop, and also in Pyoro, in Bird and Bean, the main thing, or one of the main things that we wanted to take away from it was the fact that when you got more score in that game, the background and elements of the game visually would change dramatically.
Yeah,
you can attest to that.
I also think further along development, when it came to boss design and even the decision to make everything hand drawn, you can say was pretty inspired by Cuphead.
Yeah,
But yeah, those are our main inspirations.
awesome. Yeah. So in this original game, which inspired it, was something Bean? I'm not a WarioWare person, so I don't really know. Did they have multiple characters you could choose, or is that something you implemented as a design choice for your game?
Sort of. There were two games. In Japan, it's called Pyoro. In the United States, it was called Bird and Bean. And Bird and Bean had two game modes where you actually switched between two different birds that acted very differently. Pyoro, the main character, would actually spit beans out of his mouth and break the beans above him. And another character his tongue would elongate and grab the beans out of the sky, which is kind of inspiration for one of our characters in the game, Pajarito. But I think when it came to making more characters, it came down to us finishing the core game. And I think at the time I just really wanted multiple characters, but we just didn't have the time. So when it came to making the sequel, we just made it a point to add multiple characters.
Awesome. And from going back onto characters, what inspired the characters' designs, and maybe their uniqueness, as how they perform compared to other characters. Yeah. Does anyone like to answer this from design team?
In particular, when we made the original Game Jam game, Bethany was actually a concept which we had just in our little sketchbook. Or I say sketchbook, it's more like sketch paint documents, which are floating around somewhere. There was two characters made in that little sheet when we were doing that game jam. One turned out to be Goob, which we went with, and one, sat there. We didn't really do anything with until we ended up making GoobnBalloonsDX, and that turned out to be Bethany. So that's kind of how Bethany ended up being made. The other characters didn't quite come around until we decided, we want to have a cast of characters, and I forget exactly how it came along. I know Mr. Analog, it's decently self-explanatory. His whole thing is kind of I'll say gimmick, but it's it's very themed. I believe Veronica might have thought of Pajarito.
Yeah,
I actually think
this was the original image.
It was kind of Pajarito in particular was like a joint effort between a lot of people. I think I was the first one to say I wanted a bird because we really wanted to pay homage to Bird and Bean, and we really wanted a bird character. I remember Ben having a big part of how that character turned out too, along with Veronica.
I certainly, I think I came up with the name for him.
Yeah,
I think I remember.
I put the original sketches in the chat, but I remember I was told at the time to come up with new balloon designs or character designs, and and this was probably the first version of Pajarito and Quinward, and the maniacal balloon actually had a tail initially until we had to scrap that idea. And these were also some other character concepts, like a cat and a tank.
Which I'm sure had some similar mechanics to Mr. Analog. At least in thought.
Well, I have a question from PokeNerd, which kind of relates to characters as well. So, when you change your character's color, does it count as a different person or bird or goob, or are they all just painted themselves?
I think whatever concept makes you happier is the correct answer. I think it would be a disservice to everyone if we said it one way or the other. If you want your own OC goob, you could most certainly make that.
We did discuss that goobs come in all sorts of colors, so might not be goob, might be a different goob.
Okay, and do each of you have a favorite character to play as? Maybe from a gameplay perspective, or maybe from a design perspective. Like, if we could go around, starting with top to bottom, Ben, like favorite character, why you like them?
Ben.
I think he's muted.
Sorry about that. Can you ask the question again?
So when it comes to characters, do you have a favorite character? Maybe from gameplay or from the design perspective? We're just going to go around and see what everyone's favorite character is.
From a gameplay perspective, I would say Bethany is definitely my favorite to play. However, I think Pajarito is my definite best in terms of, or definite favorite in terms of design. I think his gormless expression is second to none.
As
Veronica?
for me, it's hard to say. They all do different things, but I would say, like, aesthetically, I like Pajarito the most, just because his development story is really funny, and also really funny. And but mechanically, I would say my favorite is Mr. Analog, just due to his speed and precision when it comes to aiming.
Awesome. I would like to touch back on the development story. We'll come back to that. Yes, so Chris?
I love all of my children equally except for Pajarito. He is a little green bastard, and I think all of the struggles and woe that I've had in development have been because of that little fucker. I'm just gonna say
angel. No,
he's a very
angel.
pleasant little fellow, and Chris particularly does not like him because he had to reanimate him like 4 or 5 times throughout the entire development.
Yeah, look, how could you hate this little boy?
He is a little angel.
Yeah. Fenton, who's your favorite character?
I think I've always just sort of preferred Mr. Analog. I think in just terms of just the way that he looks, I kind of gravitate towards him the most. And also just, I think, in particular, I think he's kind of just the best choice for bosses oftentimes, because, especially for like the Boog fights, you can really sort of get into like angles which the other characters just kind of can't because they're locked to 5 directions. I think it's an interesting dichotomy. I just think he just sort of even if he's strictly speaking maybe not always the most advantageous to use. I think he feels really nice to use, in my opinion, and because of that, I like him a lot.
Okay, so Pajarito development story. Who's going to tell it?
So basically, I think when we say a funny development story, we're probably talking about 2 main things. One just being that we just took a lot of like redesign. Actually, maybe 3 things, right? One is that in terms of animation, he just took a lot of work. There's just no other way to put it. He just kind of maybe certain things could have been done more efficiently, but in the end,
I guess I could speak for the animation side. Unlike the rest of the characters, Pajarito consists of 2 sprites. Technically 3. His face is a different sprite, his body is a different sprite, and his beak is a different sprite. And getting his beak to work correctly was excruciatingly difficult. It's a beak. It's not a lot to draw, but I want to say each direction Pajarito pecs is 6 frames of animation. So, and he could peck in 5 different directions So I had to redraw those many, many, many times. And again, just getting it to work properly was such a pain. And
I put
I'm
some
sure somebody else
screenshots
can.
of the sprite sheets in the chat. Look at all
Yeah,
that.
maybe Tomas can talk about the name issue with Pajarito, because
Oh yes,
he's the one that discovered it.
I was like not even sure if that was something I should bring up, but yes.
we've already
So-
sworn. Go
so-
ahead.
I've already cursed, so I think at this point.
So Pajarito
Well-
is my favorite, honestly. Because
Everyone's favorite.
because I'm Spanish, so
For
I
good
feel a little
reason.
represented with him having a Spanish name, which means little bird for those that don't know in Spanish. But yeah, throughout development, his name Pajarito is kind of long, so it's sometimes abbreviated, and he started to develop a nickname, which was Paja, which is like Paja. Just a shortening of the name. What I think the team didn't know that being from, well, actually, this isn't as common in Spain, but my family's from Argentina, and it's very common in Latin America, is that paja is actually a really vulgar word for genitalia in a lot of Latin America, for
But
male genitalia specifically, and so and there was art, so there were assets in the game, like there was a sign for a cafe that was
Paja's
like
Javas.
yeah, Paja's Javas, and I was like, you guys should change that because I think there's going to be some misunderstandings.
And it was really late into development. It was kind of the point where we stopped pushing art assets. So we had to go back because we had a building in our game called Penis Javas, and we had to fix that. So another
Yep.
reason for everyone to love Pajarito.
Our special little boy.
Oh.
I'm
Here
sure
you go.
localization would have loved that.
Yeah.
So
That sign ended up saying Javarito, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I guess
The change.
one more quirk to Pajarito that might be hard to appreciate for people who speak one language. I'm not sure if this is actually in the final games or not. I most certainly wanted it to be. In English, he's named Pajarito for small bird, but I think in Spanish, he's just called Little Bird in English, just to kind of have that flip-flop. I'm pretty sure that's in the Spanish version of the game, but it's been a while since I played that version, so...
I'm pretty sure we added that.
Yeah. So everybody play the game in Spanish.
just a little Easter egg there, which is awesome, guys. We have Jill with us in the voice chat, so welcome, Jill. Thank you very much for your question. Jill has asked, if you had unlimited time to make the game again, would you change any major elements or handle anything differently? And I'll open the floor to this question.
Honestly, I think there are probably many things. Unlimited time is a dicey thing to give, because I think if you give literally unlimited time, you kind of end up with literally unlimited content. But I think in terms of like core features that I think we would put in if we were to make, I don't know, like a GoobnBalloonsDX 2, I think something on the short list, the more that I see feedback, would be trying to figure out like online multiplayer for it, as opposed to just local multiplayer for it. And there are things like Parsec and Steam local, and whatever Steam has.
Remote play.
Yeah, remote play. But in the end, it's basically those are all ways to extend couch co-op games. This is a couch co-op game right now, and the more that I kind of think about things, the more I'm thinking like, what, it probably actually would be pretty worth it if we had quote unquote unlimited time to just like figure out how to make this, but online multiplayer. And I think the next time that we do something like this, that will probably be on the short list of things that we strive to do. The next time that we make one of these sort of like simple multiplayer games.
Something. Oh, you go, Veronica.
And I would have liked to added more like mode types, like mystery, mayhem, endless, and that could go in tandem with the online multiplayer dream. I just think that chaos could be really fun, but we just didn't have enough time in this current development cycle to implement that.
For the folks who don't know, there's a balloon type called the mystery balloon. I think it only shows up in like one level of the game, but when you pop it, like weird things will happen, and it is a bit of a shame that we didn't have more time to flesh that out. On my end, originally, GoobnBalloons was supposed to have 4 bosses. One after DiOS.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it took me a while to give up on the dream, but you can see what it was supposed to be in the first level Goob Star if you get enough points. Giant shadowy figure appears in the background with a creepy smile.
I had actually set up some preliminary sections of that boss, like a few different attack patterns and things that were fully functional. But we didn't have enough time to fully animate it. We didn't have enough time to get enough in. And we decided that it would be better to focus on earlier bosses, making them more functional, and doing this one last. And we just didn't finish it.
How the boss would have worked, and I need to get this idea out there just because you guys won't be able to play it, is after you beat DiOS, Goob would have been teleported to like a nightmare world where he would have to fight this eldritch horror called the Smiling Friend. And the Smiling Friend would be aware that like Goob is in a video game and would literally pull levels from outside the level he was in and slam them into the screen. So you'd be playing on like Goob Star, and the Smiling Friend would reach out of the screen and grab like the lasers from the underwater stage, and like they would fire onto the level. But alas, it didn't happen. Maybe it'll happen in a future game.
And we will say also that we Chris particularly thought up the name for that before the pilot came out, the Adult Swim pilot came out for
Smiling Friend.
We came up with it first. They stole it from us.
Yep.
Yeah, like that was a character in the background of the original, like Game Jam game. Like, for sure it was, and that is what we called it. So.
Yeah, and it's also in a Bird and Bean.
Yes.
Or a similar character is.
If I'm not mistaken, that's also why DiOS is in 3D, unlike the rest of the game. Right? Like, because there was like the beginning of the sort of reality bending eldritch horror themes near the second half of the game, or what was going to be the second half of the game.
And one more thing I wanted. There was a time me, Finton, and Tomas were talking about ideas for DiOS when we were still developing her. Oh, I'm so sad we didn't get to do this. But originally, the final phase for DiOS was going to be very different. She was going to summon the first and second boss, and you would have to fight all 3 of them at once. Another idea that we did not have the time to do. To answer your question, there's like a million things I would do if there was infinite time, but alas, we lived in a cursed world where our time is very finite.
And so far, we've just mentioned like other features that we wanted to put in. We haven't even talked about things like the manner in which we would implement certain features, so that it would make it easier for us to have implemented other features that became a huge pain in the rump.
Yeah, I think given infinite time, the very first thing that we probably do is like redesign like certain core features which were designed a certain way early on that made things harder to design like halfway through development. But that's like that's neither here nor there.
Unfortunately, we don't even have infinite time to answer this question. So
perhaps it's best if we
Very
move
true.
on.
All right, so we have another question from one of the people tuning in. It's Cryan. Thank you very much for joining us. Any tips for designing for a younger age group? Anything people wouldn't normally think of?
Okay, so I think the thing is that I wouldn't necessarily say that we designed for a younger age group. I think younger age group.
We have easy mode.
Yeah, I guess we have easy mode. When we designed the game, we were just kind of making something that was in theme and in style with the game jam game that we made. We weren't necessarily thinking like, okay, yeah, no, this is going to be a game that appeals to a younger audience. There was a period of time, I think, like towards the later kind of end of development when we were bringing it to events, where I think it was after Play NYC, we had this idea that like, oh hey, this game is a game that appeals to like younger kids. I think we found our audience, and that was just something that was like after the fact. But in the end, I'm not even sure that that was like the most accurate assessment. I think that might have been like a sample size error from like Play NYC or something. It's in the end, I'm not necessarily sure. I don't think it's super. I'm not saying our game like doesn't appeal to a younger audience. Like obviously, like elements of it might.
I would say it's a
Really?
broad audience appeal.
Yeah.
It's a very it definitely does have some very like childlike whimsical elements to it. I would say or at least like a softer art style that could appeal to younger audiences. I think generally, if you're going to appeal to a younger audience, the obvious things of like, don't have excessive gratuitous violence and sexual content, don't have swears and stuff like that. That sort of thing is pretty obvious. But then, I guess just things like make sure that the art style is something that young kids would like, something that would appeal to them. I would say is again kind of obvious, but something to think about.
But I'm not sure in like the couple years we've been working on this, anyone on the team was like, let's make a game for kids.
Yeah,
I think our goal all the way through was just kind of like, let's make a game. So it just so happens that our game doesn't have a lot of violence or any sexual content.
I'd love to.
Unless your question meant any designing like tips for younger age groups to start development.
I don't think that. I feel like that wasn't the question.
Okay.
I'd love to add to this. It's very personal for me because I happen to have a younger brother with a like massive age gap between us, and so he is 9 years old right now. And I did, if there is one sort of, I mean, I don't know if you have a 9-year-old brother, but I was definitely at every point during the process thinking of whether or not he would like playing the game, and also whether my mom would like if he was playing the game. And thankfully they've both given some stellar feedback in that regard. But I do think, like everybody else has said, in terms of not really thinking this is only for kids, that I think if you look at the best media that is supposedly for kids, it's usually very enjoyable to watch as an adult as well, or to play, or to, it's just also accessible for a younger audience.
Also, real quick, Tomas, did you introduce yourself?
I did, yeah. But
Okay.
I can reintroduce myself. But yes, I'm the composer, one of the composers. Hi.
Yeah,
But
so
yes, I
if you
did.
have any
Yeah.
music questions, let them rip.
Oh dear. I think so. So I think to address the question most specifically, right? About game design, I think game design can be narrowed down to a particular part of the game development process as it pertains to the design of the game itself, right? And I think in terms of that, um, I feel like we just kind of learned that, especially in a game that's sort of endless like this one potentially, or that has an endless mode like this one, you're probably just not going to know the balance of the game until you've play tested it a lot. And that sounds really obvious, but I feel like every change that we made, we would make that change and we would never really be super certain as to whether or not it was a change that was like good for the game or not until like we had like 10 people go in and like try to get like super high scores. I guess another big game design lesson that we actually learned from actually marketing when they first came on, and we had the consultancy, right, where basically a man came and told us how marketable our game was.
Which was a very process for us.
Yeah. Yeah, he had a really good point, which was that the arcade mode that we had currently, like when he gave us his consultancy, was sort of too easy, at least at first. And he was just sort of like, yeah, people are going to play this and then refund the game. And we're like, oh, okay. I mean, I can kind of see that, but I don't think I would necessarily, have gone as far as to come to that conclusion until you came out and told me. So, I'm glad you told me. And because of that, what we added was the angry bird that if you
The
shoot
two
at
can't.
the two can't. A little bird that zips across the screen, and if you shoot at it, it gets angry and dive bombs you. There is now a thing that you should not shoot on the screen to make it more interesting in arcade mode.
So folks who have played the game like a few months ago, we've added a new enemy, which Veronica added to the chat. So our demo's out right now if you want to see how this enemy has kind of changed the course of the game. Download the demo and give it a play. But I also want everyone else to answer what we've learned. I think that's a very interesting question.
I completely agree with. Oh, sorry. I'll let you go, Ben.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'd say, planning ahead for things generally is or at least like planning in short bursts is generally a pretty good idea. Especially when it comes to like the amount of effort you have to put into certain sections of the game. I mean, and also just future proofing. So like setting up things so that they're easy to edit afterwards. A lot of the time, just having that sort of like, I guess just have foresight. Just keep a foot in the future, because often you don't realize what kind of like direction your development is going to take half the time unless you have like a very specific plan set out. So you're going to end up with a lot of curveballs, and you're going to end up with a lot of work that you've done that's just not going to take effect, or work that you've done that you're going to need to do again. if you're not doing it properly the first time. And oftentimes you won't know if you're doing it properly the first time unless you plan ahead.
Yeah, there are a lot of times we had to remake assets, or there were times where we were working on the story mode and we weren't quite sure how long it was going to be.
Yeah. And features that like kind of were like that final boss kind of thing was like started but not finished. I think I spent like a good 3 weeks or so on that, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. And then I was like, oh, we don't have like anything for the previous bosses set up. So
Right.
yeah, again, also prioritization.
Ben pretty much said what I was gonna say, like just having to go back and fix something and realizing, oh, this is gonna be very tedious. I wish we try to plan ahead or in the moment try to figure out what if something goes wrong. Let's prevent that from happening in the future, I guess.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so Seth, who's also with us, thank you very much for joining us, asks, were there any early character designs concepts that did not end up making it into the game?
Yeah.
Well, I did put them in the chat earlier. We had like a cat in a tank that was gonna kind of work like Mr. Analog. We had like this lizard with a fireball, this little spiky dude.
I'm not sure if a lot of those were ever truly considered to be in the game.
They were designed, but
I mean, there were ideas.
When
you were coming up with the final character.
There was at one point going to be in phase 2 of the Queen. How it is currently is the King balloon appears and slams down. At one point, I think this idea was considered a little bit more. Instead, she would summon her pet cat, who had like a tail.
I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, that had like a tail of balloons, and it would bounce around the stage. And we actually fought for a little bit. First, it was supposed to be a part of that boss fight. Then we were briefly considering making it like a special balloon that comes in, but we did eventually drop that one.
That was at the time when we had like all the special balloons figured out except for a yellow balloon, and I was very gung-ho about including a yellow balloon so we have a rainbow. It looks prettier. But then we eventually just thought a bomb was easier to figure out than this cat balloon mechanic.
Trails can be a little tough when you're working with like custom made
physics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's another thing that I would want that like in like a GoobnBalloons 2, I would probably definitely change is I think right now the way that the balloons balance is a sort of like my own sort of like hack job solution. I think going back to it, and the more that I think about it, I totally just would want to use something that's more like either like Godot physics or Unity physics centric, and like less of my own thing in a future project. But let's skip it back a little bit.
Awesome, thank you very much. So we've had most of the community questions. I'm going to ask a closing question. It's quite broad, so I'll let you guys fill in as you see fit. How did you come together as a team? Like who did it start with, and and how did you kind of all meet and assemble this team to create the game?
Before we get to that, is it okay if we answer like some of the other questions in Ask the Devs? Because I do see some there. I don't want them to feel like we're just ignoring them because we did say that we would answer them.
Yeah. We got the time to crack it. Yeah, absolutely.
Let's do a quick round.
Okay.
Right, so
lightning round it.
So Coffee Chris asks, is a group of goob called goobers? I don't see why not.
It's
could be
a gooble.
And now.
It's a gooble.
And now, yeah. You just decided it. Aqua Twist Zach Esk asks, repost from yesterday for better visibility. Any plans on developing / releasing a mobile version?
Can I answer this one?
Yes.
There technically is a mobile version that is isolated completely on my tablet. Over the course of a weekend, I actually spent some time building a mobile version, and it surprisingly works pretty well.
But
Granted, we want to make sure that the console and PC release comes out perfectly, and we also want to spend time with our 2 other current projects. So I think there may be a day where there is a mobile version of GoobnBalloonsDX. We agree with a lot of people that it would fit well on a mobile device, but we want to make sure, one, that everything is good with the current version of GoobnBalloons, and 2, we honestly kind of want to break from Goobn Friends and work on completely new ideas that might surprise people. But I'm sure one day we'll return.
Yeah, so I guess the short answer would be it's probable for some time in the future. However, it's certainly not coming out soon, and definitely not in this first batch of releases. However, it is definitely in the air. So plans are certainly there. Just those plans are not very far along yet. But okay, yeah, that's a response to that question. How many goobs does it take to screw in a light bulb? Chris?
127.
Good.
are they stupid?
Will there be a global leaderboard that updates for high scores? Unfortunately, there will not be. That was actually one of the things that I think that's another one of those if we had infinite time now sort of things. Granted, I guess it wouldn't have been. Well, I guess we didn't try it, so we didn't really know. But we decided against it because I think we just sort of didn't want to moderate hackers on it, because that's kind of obviously in games like these a big problem is someone could go in with cheat engine and just do it. And I don't think that we wanted to deal with that for right now. It's not like we have moderation resources at our disposal. So.
It might be one of those things that's just open. We'll say that we might look into that when updating the game in the future.
I don't want to totally close it out, but certainly not on release.
Yeah, we're not making a promise that it'll happen.
Okay.
What inspired the name Iconic Arts? Well, we answered that already in that article, but I can't stop saying iconic. And Smiling Friends came out, and they started saying iconic. And
So the
we
rest
were
of
like,
the
let's
team
do
started
it.
saying iconic, and then Veronica made an emoji in our server that was the word iconic with her face in the O. And then we started saying iconic more, and when we were trying to come up with names, people started throwing around the word iconic after maybe 20 or so failed names.
Iconic.
Yeah,
Hex,
the
you
show
go.
Smiling Friends has
Cat.
a lot to do with our history, oddly enough.
But we came up with the
next
name
question.
Smiling Friend before the show, so
Hex Yuko asks, when will you wear wigs? And that was aimed at me specifically. If they're asking when we, the developers, will wear wigs, I don't know, when we feel like it. If you're asking
my hair
when
falls out.
will you be able to wear hats in game, if that's what you're asking, yeah, you'll be able to wear those in the full release, just not in the demo, because in the demo we made it none are unlockable.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the full game, if you press the bumpers and you have hats unlocked, you will switch between your hats. So,
Correct.
yeah, I think that covers everything in Ask the Devs, right? I don't think we missed anything.
Nope. I think that's it.
I
Yeah.
think so.
All right. Is it okay if I take this one?
I think I kind of have the most. I guess you could take this one. Yeah.
Team Lullaby days.
So, back in college, believe it or not, at least in my junior year, most of the team, some extra people, came together to form an independent study, right? We wanted to the goal was to make a demo for an RPG with rhythm game mechanics, wherein you would get into an RPG battle, and then you would target an enemy, and then your character would walk up to that enemy and have to press the button to the beat of the music in the background. And that's sort of an oversimplification of what our original idea for that game was. But regardless, we came together to work on that as an independent study, and that was like the first project that we worked together on as a group consistently. That study was we did that independent study for for a semester rather, and then once we were done with that project, a few semesters after, we were all around, sort of done with college, and we decided, hey, Chris and I made Goobn Balloons for a game jam, sort of in the middle of the development of the demo which we originally came together to work on, and the showcase that demo was actually supposed to be in, Visions, for Fitchburg State. The little game jam game, which we made in a week or so, actually also showed up in the same showcase because we decided to just submit it on a whim, right? So right next to the thing that we worked on for 2 some odd years altogether, right next to it was this little week-long game jam game, which had a lot of polish on it. And we decided, hey, you know what? People had a lot of fun with this little game jam game. Why not we make our first foray into console development that game, or for what we intended to be console development that game. Our goal with the game was to have something that we would feel comfortable putting onto consoles, right?
I think even before all of that, though, it came down to I wanted to grab kind of some of the best students in our game design course and bring them into a project. So I think me and Finton were always working on games together. But when it came to Veronica and Ben, I sought them out because I thought they were really cool people to work with, and
That's
they made amazing artwork. So.
And boy, were you wrong.
I just kind of went up to them one day. I didn't even know either of them that well, and I was just like, hey, I like your stuff. I want to work on a game with you. And, everyone said yes. Well, not everyone said yes. I got quite a few no's and a few people who said yes and never showed up. But folks who did show up are here, and we're on this crazy journey together.
Yep.
Next.
Oh yeah, much later.
Yeah, we were actually in a bit of a crisis at one point. I can't get into too much details about this, but our original composer had to leave the project. And we were at a point where we lost all of the music for the game when that happened. They took the music with them, and we had a game that was completely uncomposed. And we were freaking out. We thought this would kind of turn into many months of delay as we figure out a solution. But Ben worked with Tomas on a separate project and
Your
we brought
senior
Tomas in, and
capstone.
yeah, and Tomas and his team heroically kind of saved the project
Yeah.
in a big way. They recomposed like every track that was missing, and like half of the game's music was removed. And they came in, and I want to say within a month, not only recomposed everything that was taken out, but made it better.
Oh, I think it was more like maybe 2.5 months, possibly even 3. And then there were things we, there were following months where we decided to like up the ante and do more things like
pizzazz.
with, and so like DiOS is really cool because of that and stuff like that. But so those tracks took longer because they were, we started to do things like in the main menu and some other tracks in the game. There is now there's some moments where like instruments take solos, like a saxophone like plays a solo, but rather than being like just the same recording every time, it's a bunch of like portions of like a much longer solo snipped together in such a way where every single time you hear it, it's a different combination of those, so it sounds like it's a new solo every time. And we started adding things like that after getting through the original soundtrack, basically. So you could say it was like 2.5 months. Definitely, it was 2.5 months for like, or roughly that for that, like replacing the original soundtrack. But then it was also, a bunch of time afterwards where we were, just like, well, let's do even more cool stuff now.
I don't get to talk about this that often because I make games and I don't make music. But I'm actually I love video game music. Love it. And I've always wanted to be a part of making music in games. And one of my favorite aspects about working on this game was working with Tomas and his team to create such an amazing soundtrack. And probably the only thing that I'm equally as excited for as the game, like Goob and Balloons releasing, is the soundtrack releasing right next to it. I am so excited people are going to be able to hear like the music in the game and isolated from the game, because I think our soundtrack is beautiful. And I'm super excited for everyone to be able to just have it and listen to it.
It's iconic.
It is iconic.
So,
Thank you.
2 more questions, and I think we'll wrap this up. So, what made the team decide on adding co-op?
We wanted it
co-op?
in the original.
Yeah, a lot of the early design philosophy of the game was, we had our original Game Jam game that it was mostly based off of what are the things that we wanted in that Game Jam game but couldn't put in that Game Jam game. And one of the first, and I think the first thing on the short list was co-op. So yeah, it was in there since the very start, kind of.
But why though?
Why? I mean, it felt natural. It felt like the kind. Playing the game and playing, the original game, it felt like the kind of game that would be fun with a friend, I guess.
Yeah.
True.
Awesome. And final question: what do you think GoobnBalloonsDX's uniqueness compared to other games like it?
I think one of the things I am the proudest about when thinking about Goob and Balloons is how different it is from a lot of other games.
The game's weird.
It is weird. I think every aspect of it is unique. I think the music is this weird in a good way, just like a lot of different genres. We were inspired by like Sailor Moon's music for the final boss theme. We have this big band approach for the first boss. Our main menu theme is like this amalgamation of like all of the themes just kind of put into one simple song. The art style and the characters are very weird and colorful, and I think it shows like the best from everyone on our team. I feel like everyone put a little bit of their soul into this game. I think it displays like Ben and Veronica's like cartoony, fun art style. I think the game mechanically is very solid and precise. And Finton and David Marshall brought that to the game. I don't know. I think it's a weird little gem.
Allura's beautiful background art.
And Allura's beautiful background art. But I think it all comes together. And in some places it doesn't come together, but that's also a part of the experience. I think in comparing that to other games is difficult for me, because other than Cuphead and Bird and Bean, I don't think we thought about other games too much while developing Goob and Balloons. But
You'd say Space Invaders in a very vague, loose sense.
Yeah.
All my older relatives say about it.
But
That's how I always
don't know.
describe it to random coworkers.
I think our game is too weird to explain in words, and everyone should, when it comes out a lot sooner than a lot of people think it will, they should pick the game up and play it.
Agreed.
Yep.
Absolutely awesome. Well, thank you very much for all of you for joining and answering the questions. It's been a pleasure having you guys here. Thank you to everyone who tuned in live and came onto the Discord channel and listened in, and also gave the questions for the devs to answer. And for everyone who listened to this, maybe on YouTube or wherever it will end up, I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. So, any closing thoughts before we wrap this up, or are we Gucci?
I do have one thing I'd like to say. I think a lot of people have wanted to hear a special date regarding our game. And I think by the end of that this week, we'll finally be able to talk about that special date. So please stay tuned. There's some kind of pleasant news coming right around the corner.
Awesome. Keep your eyes peeled, guys, here on Discord or on our social channels. Again, thank you, everyone. And yeah, take care, guys. Hope to speak to you again in the future.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello.